Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Toxic to Triumph. This is Matthew Pfeiffer. I am your host, and I have a very special guest with me, someone that I appreciate so much. I joined her podcast at one point in time. I have Toni with me with Tips with Toni. You can find her on tipswithtoni.com, and she is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and for some people might ask, why would I have a dietitian? Why would I have a nutritionist on a relationship podcast? But when we're talking about relationships with ourselves, obviously, you guys know I talk so much about self-care, talk about self-love, and the way that we have a relationship with ourselves. And quite often, that ties in also with the relationship that we have with food. And so I have a dietitian here with us, Toni. And so once again, I appreciate so much. And I think we met initially on TikTok. Is that right?
Yeah.
And what's your, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it was so, I'm not big on TikTok. So I go on more for my own personal pleasure. So you could follow me on TikTok, but you're not going to get a lot of nutrition information there.
Well, that's okay.
But yeah, I think I'm Tips with Toni Nutrition Tips with Toni on TikTok.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
But thank you so much for having me here.
No problem. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And tell me, how did you get into this? I mean, not many people wake up and say, I'm going to be a nutritionist or a dietitian when I grow up. Typically, your background is probably very similar to mine, that you kind of backed into it for one reason or another, and you decided that this was something that interested you because you wanted to help other people out. How did you get into this?
Yeah, well, growing up, I was very overweight. And it's funny that personally, I had a great view of myself. I'll never forget. I was such a happy kid. I had so much confidence. I loved to dance. Like, I was I had so much energy. I was always like playing sports, but it kept getting pointed out to me that there was something wrong with me, even though I didn't feel like there was anything wrong with me. But apparently my size wasn't accepted by society. And I would get teased about my weight. I would be told things like, you better not have that second plate, or are you sure you want to have that? And it was just drilled into me very early on that my weight was an issue. It was a problem.
I'm curious, who would say things like that?
So everywhere from people at like school, like I got teased of, like, I'll never forget, I was in the 5th grade and I wore an blue M&M costume. And it's like a big costume because you're becoming you're a blue M&M, and it's right. Like, it's pretty big. And I'll never forget kids just being like, she doesn't need to wear that. She could have just wore a t-shirt.
Wow.
Right? Like stuff like that. And then I have like probably a story at least once per year of like a different person. And here's the thing, it was always boys. It was always boys that made comments. And then at the same time, I would have, like, I come from an Italian Greek family, and they're very loving and very supportive, and food's the center of it. But the ironic part of it is like, eat, but don't eat too much because you have to look a certain way, right? So, my grandmother, who I love very dearly, she's no longer with us, but I remember growing up when I would spend my summers with her in Florida, and she would kind of like make faces and puff her cheeks out, like if I was going to go for a second serving. And then like my dad would maybe make like the side glance, like the eyes down, like, and they didn't realize what they were doing at the time, but it was pretty damaging to me because it was kind of like I associated like I shouldn't eat more food if I want to, right? And then she'd also say things to me. My grandmother would say things like, if you keep eating that way, like no boy's ever gonna like you, like as I got older. And so very, very early on, I had made this association between my weight and my worth. And I felt like I needed to change my body to be accepted by society, and more importantly, to get love. I didn't think I was worthy of love. So I went my whole life, all the way up till I was 18 years old, before I even just like thought like a man would give me attention. But it was all because I thought like I was losing weight, and that's why I can like get into a relationship now. So it was a lot of this stuff that was kind of tied into my weight was measured by my worth. And so it was a really long way of sharing that. I learned really early on that as the more I was told I needed to change what I ate, I would restrict my intake. I would exercise excessively. And it was this very vicious cycle of under eating, overeating, self-sabotaging, just like constantly beating myself up, trying every new latest and greatest like fad diet or diet trend, or like ripping out things in magazines and trying to follow meal plans. And I mean, I was doing that really early on. And I finally had like this realization that even if this did help me lose weight, I was completely miserable because I was obsessed with food. I had no energy. I couldn't focus. I was always very athletic. So even though I was overweight, I could still, run and all those things, but I had no energy to run. Like I remember having these goals of being on varsity basketball when I was a freshman, and my skills were there, but I was convinced that if I had a faster mile, that's what was going to get me there. So rather than like training to have a faster mile, I thought, let me stop eating, lose some weight, and that will help me get a faster mile, when really it just blew up in my face because I had no energy to run. Like I was just completely exhausted. So anyways, that's a really long way of sharing.
Oh, no. I think what you said was you dropped a lot of gems in there. And what I think is interesting is that, I think that when we very first started this conversation, I introduced that you were a dietitian, and people who follow this podcast were once again like, what the hell is she doing on here? Right. But then they started to hear a lot of the things that they probably are dealing with when we're talking about criticism from people that we love and care about, regardless of if we're talking about someone that's narcissistic or not. But the criticism, right, all of a sudden comes to life, right, when you're in your situation, when when you're in the fifth grade, just like you just described, right, in that M&M suit, then all of a sudden everything starts to come back when you're being picked on. All the criticisms from the people that were saying things to you, right, where start to come back. People who are in toxic relationships, when they leave that relationship, all of those criticisms start to come back. The relationships that they have with food. Quite often, people that we talk about in these type of relationships, the person that they're with talk about their weight pretty frequently. They put them into what's called a double bind that doesn't matter what you decide, you've made the wrong decision. But the other thing that I heard you say a lot, right, and it circles around something you said about self-sabotage, right, that even though you were dieting, right, and on the surface, possibly even eating right and doing things for the right reasons, and I would do air quotes if people could see me, that you were really doing it in a very unhealthy way.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people can relate to that because of, you can diet, but not be doing it in the right way. You can be self-sabotaging and actually causing yourself more harm, and doing it for all the wrong reasons, not doing it for yourself, but doing it for, in your situation, for that fifth grade boy that was picking on you, for grandma that was picking for you. Can you talk about that a little bit? Not dieting for the right reasons and what that looks like, and how can you tell the difference?
Oof, yeah. I mean, it's very much, if you have trouble being consistent, it's probably just because your idea of healthy is skewed from the jump. Like, so your probable version of being healthy is trying to fit, your life into a diet plan or into a meal plan or into a current plan, when really what we need to do is really focus on what you talk about, Matt, which is self-care and using, food as a way to, eat more foods that make you feel good and give you energy and feel your best. And that doesn't mean you never have those foods that you might consider as like quote unquote unhealthy, but it's just you learn to have them in a way that brings you joy, but not so much where you eat them past fullness and you're like, oh, why did I just do that? And you kind of bring yourself down from that. So it's kind of it's twofold. So thinking of your nutrition and fitness, sometimes it can be like this perception is if I want to be healthy, everything I eat needs to be healthy. I can never skip a workout, and it becomes very all or nothing. And then the other side to that is that you're probably doing it, like you said, for the wrong reasons, where if it's solely because you want to lose weight, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if that's the only reason that you're trying to change your body and change your quote unquote health to look a certain way or to be a certain number on the scale, and you never do the inner work and you never really go about it in a way that's reflective of setting boundaries and taking care of yourself, and you'll do almost just about anything just to get to a certain number on the scale, you're going to always be disappointed, and that number is never going to feel like it's enough because you're trying to prove something. It took me so long. I will never forget, 2 years ago I had gotten to what I thought I would be satisfied at my weight. I got to this number that I was like, that's it, I'm done, I'm good. And then I got there and I wasn't satisfied. And I started saying, what's 5 more pounds? You know what? Actually, if I could do 5 more pounds, I could do 10 more pounds.
Right.
And it started becoming borderline where we would call it I was definitely struggling with disordered eating habits, and it was becoming borderline eating disorder like scenario. And I really needed to just check in with myself and realize like, I'm no longer doing this for me. I was doing it to prove, because even as I lost weight, and this has come with me for, it's always be a part of me, right? So even as I lost weight, I was still overweight, right? And then when I was finally at this place where I like fit like BMI standards. I fit, as a dietitian, I used to be told, I'll never forget this, when I worked for like more of like a corporate setting, I didn't work for myself. I would have people come into my office and I don't even know why people think they can say things like this, but like I had one person tell me, how am I going to help her lose weight if I'm overweight myself? Meanwhile, I was already down like 20 or 30 pounds,
right.
And I'm like living a healthy lifestyle and all that. But just even that, it was like I was reminded then that it's like, oh no, this isn't enough. I need to keep losing more weight, right? And it's because I was doing it to prove a point, to like be a dietitian that looked a certain way, or to prove, like you said, to my childhood, the boys who teased me, or to my family members, or I was trying to fit the mold of so many things, society, all that stuff. And it wasn't until I realized like I needed to really 100% do this 100% for me and define what matters to me. And what matters to me is a healthy body image, having energy, because at that point when I was trying to get to those lower amounts, I needed to really count every calorie and protein and like we call macros, like everything that was going in. It was starting to become too much where it was taking over my mental health. So for me, when I think of health, I want it to be healthy for my body, but also healthy for my mind.
Right.
And so when I reestablished kind of what that would look like for me, that's how I was able to, I actually ended up gaining some weight, but I was so much happier there.
Right.
Because it was just like, this is good for me. This is comfortable for me. This is me. I'm still eating well and balanced. I'm still moving my body, but I'm no longer feeling like I need to work out at a certain level and I need to, eat a certain amount to look a certain way. It was more just like, I'm just living my life. I'm taking care of myself the best way that I can. And that is enough.
I'm hearing, I can just imagine people listening to this and they're screaming on the other end. How do you transition from caring so much about what people think to not caring whatsoever, right? From this, and I get this question so much about people pleasing, right? The fact that, I care so much about what people think and I know that it's wrong, but how do I actually execute? How do I go from caring what that fifth grade boy thinks? How do I care about what my spouse or significant other or what my current family thinks and the people that have recently said something to me? How do I let that go and still find that balance of health, good relationship with food, everything that you're talking about? Where's that transition and how do I make sure that I maintain once I get there?
Yeah. So one of the things that I say is that the more you love your decisions, the less you need others to love them.
That's
So
nice.
I don't know if that's my quote. I don't think that's my quote.
It's yours
I've
now.
heard
So
it.
whenever
I've
you
heard
hear
it,
me
but I
say
say it
that,
a lot.
I got it from Toni from here on out. Yeah. Can you repeat that for people? And so I
So
can write it
the
down for myself.
the more you love your decisions, the less you need others to love them. So what that means is getting really, really clear on what's important to you. And honestly, if it wasn't for me going to therapy, I wouldn't be able to stay here today and tell you that. Like, with working with my therapist for 3 or 4 years consistently, it became more and more apparent that I kept falling into these patterns of people pleasing when it came to family, when it came to, I had like 4 jobs at one point because I didn't know how to say no. When it came to relationships that I was in, it was constantly like giving to everybody else, but like who takes care of Toni? And Toni's always okay. Toni's always fine. Like nobody needs to, I got Toni, but I never got Toni. I never took care of Toni. And so slowly, it happens slowly, like anything. Like real change doesn't happen overnight. You kind of start doing the small wins. You start saying, no thank you to things, or like, I wish I could, but I need to, this isn't serving me. And then you start to just like get really clear on like what works for you. And then from there, you're able to kind of stick up for yourself and then really understand that this works for you. And sometimes, and the thing that I think I had to get okay with was knowing that like sometimes people aren't going to agree with you, or they might still comment, but a lot of times it's a reflection on them. And I'm sure you've talked with with people before about like projection. And that's something that was really hard for me to get. But when I finally grasped it, I was like, okay, because then I started to look at myself and I started to recognize like, I'm not really someone who, as the happier I got, like, I wasn't really one to like I would never really be one to like make comments or like judge or anything like that. The only time I would be judging or caught myself making a comment was when I was struggling with that myself. So I started to realize that if someone's making a comment about my weight or about what I'm eating, it's probably because that's important to them. It has almost nothing to do with me.
Right.
And that kind of helped me through that. But it's definitely not an easy thing. So I don't want to say like, yeah, one day you wake up and you just don't care. Like there's still parts of me that I think do care about certain things, but it's definitely a whole lot less. And it's not in a way that's like taking over my life. Like it really was taking over my life at one point. So,
what do you do now? Like, because it's one thing to transition, and then it's another thing to maintain, right? Let's say that you meet someone, and let's say you just value their opinion, right? And they make a comment. They see a picture of you in that M&M suit and that sort of thing, or whatever, and they make a comment, and it brings you back. Because I can imagine that when you began to execute a lot of these things, that there was a lot of anxiety setting these boundaries, right? And you have to do it anyway, right? It's one thing to say these things, but it's another thing to actually execute. When you run into these, you meet someone brand new, whether it be a significant, I know you're seeing someone, so I know it's not a significant other, but in terms of just some random persons that you value their opinion, they make a comment, like, where do you set those boundaries? How do you set them? What does that look like? And how does it feel like internally? Like, do you still get nervous? Do you still get anxiety? What does that look like now?
Yeah, it definitely still happens. You have to remember too, like as a registered dietitian and people who know me in my field and what I do, it's to them, it's an open book to talk to me about their weight, their diet. And they'll look at my plate. Hey, you're eating that? Like, I'm a dietitian. Just because I'm a dietitian, I mean, I can eat whatever I want. I'm a human being, so it still kind of comes up. And so, like I shared earlier, it always triggers. It's never not going to trigger. So it always triggers. And I've just gotten really good at being an observer and not a reactor. Once again, something I've learned in therapy. And so it will trigger and I will just check in. And it's always different depending on who it's coming from and when it happens. Because sometimes it's like, it just comes, you're like out of left field. They're like, what? And then other times it's like there's particular people that it's almost like expected. So those are actually, believe it or not, a little bit easier because you kind of I'll set the intention before I go into a scenario. I'm like, okay, there's a very strong possibility. Someone's going to say something, something's going to be said. How do I want to be? How do I want to respond? How do I want to, and you're not going to really know until you're in the moment. But if you kind of just say, like, one thing I say to myself is like, I just want to be an observer and I want to be someone who listens. And I don't want to be someone who engages in canter and arguing, because there's just certain people that are just not worth your breath and your energy. So if something gets said and it triggers me, I'll be an observer. I'll probably just like laugh or smile or like, I'm like, what? Like, I don't know. I won't be too much of a reaction. And then I often process it later. So if I need to like get up from where I'm sitting, and just go to the bathroom. Or I often journal either in the night or every morning I journal, but sometimes if it's something really just happened and I can't fall asleep, I'll journal it out. And I process it on my own time.
Hmm.
And I ask questions like, why did that trigger me? And often it's because of something that happened in my childhood, and it's
Hmm.
not even that apparent. It just feels very apparent, like it
Yeah.
feels very strong. So I've just gotten real, and that's been so hard. Like I feel like I'm talking about it like it's so easy, but this is like years of therapy.
Right. And I'm
Like
actually glad
really.
that you're saying this, because this is something that I say often, that it's not, and you were athletic growing up. It's not like you break your arm and it's a 6 to 8 week recovery and then you're done.
Right.
Right. We're
You're
talking
always
about
doing.
more of like a deficiency. I call it, when I'm with the people I'm working with, I say I call it a self-love deficiency, and that you need to consistently work on things. It's not like you're done and then, like, it's just a constant progression. And I
Yeah.
always link it to someone who has an iron deficiency. And now I'm speaking your language, right? Someone who
Hmm.
has an iron deficiency, they have to eat food that's high in iron. They have to take supplements. They have to do things on a regular basis. And when they don't, those old symptoms begin to come back. And even though you might be feeling better after after taking the supplements and eating things high in iron, you still need to know that if you stop, that the old symptoms will begin to come back.
Hmm.
So I'm hearing a lot of that. Now, and I digress a little bit, but when we talk about this relationship with food, and it sounds to me like you speak a lot of the same language that I do, that a relationship with someone else. I tell people that it starts out with a relationship with you.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you feel a lot of the same thing. Can you talk about that a little bit and maybe tie that into how that relates to trauma, how food relates to trauma, and the parallels that
Hmm.
you might see there as well?
Yeah, God, there's so many ways we can go about this. I think the first thing that I do want to comment on is where you were kind of saying you always have to be putting in the work to, really, if you, so I'm going to just give you lots of quotes. I'm in the middle of writing a book and I gave a TED talk, so I'm all about quotes.
Right. Absolutely. We're all about it here, so we're good.
So if you like the results it's giving you, you're going to have to keep putting in that same amount of effort to get that in return. Right? So if you like the result it's giving you, you're going to have to keep putting in the same amount of effort to get that in return, because here's another one. Anything you do temporarily will only produce temporary results. So that is the mindset that a lot of people need to take on, and which is why your nutrition plan, your eating style, your exercise regimen, your day-to-day, they need to be reflective of your habits, and they also need to be something that you enjoy. So a lot of people are like, oh, I could follow this meal plan for like a week and then drop this weight and then like feel better, and like, yeah, but like, can you follow that for the rest of your life? Like, no, you got to learn how to cook. You got to learn, how to order food if you're not going to cook. Like, you need to understand like what foods work for you best in the long run, and learning how to like be flexible with that and navigate with that. So that's something that I think is really important, just with your mindset. Now, when it comes to your actual like relationship with yourself before you kind of get into relationship with someone else, it's important that, same thing with, if you're thinking of, I'll be happy when I lose this weight, or I'll be happy when I get in this relationship, or I'll be happy when I have more money.
Hmm.
Those comments are just, you got to do some inner work, because that
Hmm.
is so not true.
I agree
Right?
with that 100%.
Yeah.
I'll give it back over to you for a second, but that's something that hits home with a lot of people, that, they think that if I get back into another relationship, if I get married, if I have
Hmm.
kids, then I will be happy but the only thing that happens in those type of situations, and in your world, if I lose 20 pounds, I'll be happy. The only thing that happens is that you replace the stress of getting there with the stress of trying to keep it when you do get
Mm.
it, right. And
Mm.
that's the only thing that happens, is that all of a sudden you're paranoid trying to get there, then you're paranoid trying to keep it, and then guess what, we're now in an unhealthy relationship, or we're now in an unhealthy relationship with food in your situation, in your world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. I never even thought about it that way, but that's very, very true. Because then I'm just like thinking of all my clients that, I have this fear of gaining the weight back, and we have to talk through that. But in regards to, you know, your relationship with food and what that probably says about kind of you and your life, and maybe more work you need to do on yourself, or maybe the relationship that you're in, is like, I mean, there's many things that can happen, but one thing I'll share is that a lot of the people that I work with struggle with either emotional eating or binge eating disorder or disordered eating habits, where it's a lot of restriction and then a lot of overeating, and they're caught up in this diet cycle. And very often we find, like through working together, that it goes really deep. They're either people pleasers, overachievers, have a lot of anxiety, struggle with depression, have had a recent trauma. And all of those now are just the way that they're choosing to cope with those issues that are going on, you know, whatever it is in their presently or in their past. And we start to identify, you know, why they are eating a certain way, or why they feel the need to control their food, but because their life is in chaos, right? Or why they, you know, end up kind of quote unquote like throwing in the towel and just like eating whatever they see and not caring, and I'm putting quotes, lots of quotes, like air quotes, like not caring about themselves or their weight. But it's all a reflection of probably, you know, a current relationship that they're in, or a relationship that they had in their past. Or I also work with women who are single, who feel that they will need to be in a relationship to be happy. And it's the alone time that they get a lot of anxiety, and then they use food to help kind of calm that anxiety, because they don't want to be alone. They feel alone. And so what we'll talk about is like utilizing, you know, getting to know themselves. And I tell them to like date themselves, and like, you know, finding other things to do so they can enjoy their own company. Because if they don't, chances are they're going to keep looking elsewhere for it, and probably not in the best places.
I can imagine. I know one of the issues that I see quite often with people I work with is that when they leave a bad relationship, or when they start dating again, or when they do things for themselves, right? Because there's been such a powerful trauma bond that they feel guilty, right? Can you talk about that a little bit? I'm sure that the people you work with experience a lot of the same thing, that like, you know, if they have a cheat meal, they feel guilty. If they, you know, the fact that, or when they, I know you mentioned before about not feeling deserving of things, right? And they don't feel they deserve to lose weight, or maybe they begin to eat healthy, but they're not seeing results on a scale, or they're not seeing results in the mirror. And so they feel ashamed, and they, you know, instead of feeling healthy, or feeling happy, or happy with the process. Is that something that you see a lot? And if so, what do you tell these type of people?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, guilt and shame is really heavy when it comes to body image, when it comes to eating patterns. It's because of the society we live in, and the mixed messages, the literally 72 plus billion diet industry out there that's constantly telling yourself that you need to change your body, and that, you know, this is the way to do it. And so we live in a society where people literally are afraid to eat fruit. Like they literally think that fruit is going to make them fat. It will not.
Unless it's a banana, right? I'm just kidding.
No.
Too many carbs. I'm just teasing.
No. Okay. Literally. So it's like the fact that as a dietitian, I thought that my work was going to be able to just like help people like get all this balanced food and blah, blah, blah. And like, no, my work is having to undo a lot of the mixed messaging that's been out there in the media. And so people literally don't even know what to eat, which is so sad, because we're human, we're mammal, and most mammals, if you know, they know exactly what to eat. They eat when they're hungry, they stop when they're full. They know. But because of all the mixed messaging that's been kind of given to us, we don't even know what's hungry, what we want, like what is, nobody even like knows what hunger is. It's right. Like they're like literally disconnected from their hunger and fullness cues. So I say that to say that a lot of foods have this association, depending on what diet you did, depending on what, you know, book you read, or, you know, Google search you did, or article you read, you know, you probably have a list of foods that are considered bad.
Right.
That you consider bad. And so the very first thing that I do with my clients is really help them understand that there's really no good or bad foods. Like there's literally, food is just food. Some foods have more nutritional value than others. Some foods make you feel more full than others. Some foods are really just about like they taste good and there's not much nutrition to it, but that's okay too. Like there's just, it's food, right? And so and the reason we have to do that is because if you don't, you're always going to start feeling like guilt or shame for eating something like, oh, I'm not supposed to have, I'm only allowed to have 2 cookies. So if I have 3 cookies, I automatically feel shame. So now that I feel shame, I only had 3 cookies. I may as well just eat the whole sleeve. I already screwed up. And then they stay in that cycle. Mm-hmm. So I always remind them that there's always an opportunity for you to gain, I don't like to use the word control, but become in charge.
I call it responsibility.
Okay.
Yep. Taking responsibility for yourself.
Take responsibility and just know that it's never too late. And so if you got into, what you're like noticing those patterns of getting back into a binge or, emotional eating episode, it's recognizing that, checking in, and so I use what I call the acronym PAUSE. So pause, P is pay attention. Pay attention. What's going on? A is assess how you feel. So am I feeling sad, anxious, depressed, lonely, whatever it is? You understand why you feel that way. Go try to separate what's going on. Did I have a really stressful day? Did I see my friend got married and I've been wanting to get married? Like, whatever it is. S is set up a plan. So maybe you need to go into a different room. Maybe you need to just stop. just like say I'm done, like that's it, I had enough, like stop. And then E is engage in that behavior, whatever's going to help support that plan. So that's something that I have my clients go through, because if not, they'll stay in that shame spiral. And even if they overeat and they binge, you have to not restrict after. I know that's super hard because you probably feel super, 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 super full, but the restriction's only going to lead to the overeating later. So it's really important to focus on balance and understanding that there's really no good or bad foods. Food is just food, and focus on how you want to feel and incorporate those foods that really help you feel your best and feel good, because you deserve to feel good. You don't need to earn it. You don't need to work for it. You don't need to exercise to a point to be worthy of these calories or whatever. Like you can have whatever you want right now. Just, focus on how you want to feel. And use that as your guide. And I know it's not so cookie cutter as like, do this meal plan, eat these foods, don't eat these foods. But like, honestly, like anything, like your life is unique to you, and we don't have a roadmap for our life. Like we just like figure out what we want, why we want it. We go after it. We can't get it. We pivot, we make do, we learn, we grow. That there's no different in like you creating your own personalized, your own diet, which the word diet has been, perceived as like this negative, restrictive thing, but diet is just the food that you eat. So my cat just, I don't know if you saw I don't know what they just went after.
I think it was your shadow or something, but we're all good. I do have one more question. So one of the biggest questions that I get is, when someone comes to me about a toxic or narcissistically abusive relationship, one of the first questions that they have is, how did I get here? Right? I can imagine that someone is going to ask this type of question, right? Someone who feels like they have a bad relationship with food. Maybe they don't like the position that they're in terms of their quality of life when it comes to food, and whether they are over or underweight or whatever their current situation is. How did I get here? Right. For me, when I'm talking to people, it starts out with childhood, right? And that's where they learn the relationship with themselves, the relationship with others, the relationship with, where does this start, right? Does it start out in 5th grade when in the M&M outfit, or does it start out, where does this come from?
For most people, I would say it starts in childhood, just because of this. It's depending on, especially the era that you grew up in, depending on whether it happened through the movies you've watched, the TV shows, family, friends. Like it often starts in childhood. It doesn't have to, but it's very common that that's when it usually starts. But to answer your question, if anyone is feeling like, how did I get here to this place of, where they feel like they're not in touch with their hunger cues, they don't even know what to eat. They feel like they, say they're going to, eat better and then they don't. And like, they feel like scattered. They probably got there, one, because of just the society that we live in, but two, I will say, be careful. I want you to get help, but be careful who you get your help from.
That's big. Yeah.
Okay. So, and I'm not just saying this because, I have a master's in nutrition, and to become a registered dietitian, like, it takes a lot of schooling, and, and there's some really great like nutrition coaches out there that, got a certification online and they still do amazing work. Like, I'm not dismissing that,
Right.
but just be careful. Like, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And make sure that you're working with a professional who really, really knows their stuff. And it's not just going to be someone else that just like kind of takes your money and then doesn't really help you. If they're telling you what to do, but not teaching you what to do, run away.
That's big.
Run away.
I agree with that, and that's very true in my world as well. Is that, and a lot of what I do is I want to empower you. I don't want
Right.
you to be with me forever, right? You should be able to be self-sufficient, and I imagine that the same is true with you, that you want people to be self-sufficient.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And so the sooner you get the real help, a lot of people, and very, very often experts are a little bit, more, expensive, or I don't like to use the word expensive. Their value is more, they're giving more, so their prices is going to be higher.
But it's an investment.
It's an investment. Think of it as an investment, because all the other things that you're doing are just spending money. And that there's a big difference between spending money and investing your money. And think of it as like, I just got to do this so I can, like you said, like, live my life, figure out these tools, get to the nit and grit of this. And like, yeah, you'll probably always need to like, brush it up. But once they're habitual, and once you have the skills and the tools, you won't need to be in therapy every single week for the rest of your life. Right. You won't need to be a dietitian. Most of the people I work with to me, it's a minimum 6-month commitment. And then we reevaluate at that mark. And I would say on average, most people work with me anywhere from like 6 months to a year. And it's a lot. It's intense for those 6 months to a year. But think about 6 months and a year compared to your whole lifetime.
Right.
Yeah, it's to never have to obsess over food and like worry about what you look like, in a sense that we're always going to have body image issues. So that's another thing I want to just like, you're never going to like wait. You're not going to wake up every day and be like, I love my body every single day, especially if you're a woman who has hormones. Like that's just like not going to work. But it's to get you to this place where you feel really good most of the time.
Good. Yeah. I agree with 100. I agree 100%. So any closing statements, any closing remarks that you might have for someone out there that might be relating to you, any words of wisdom that you can give someone in your final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, like anything, when you're trying to make a big change, stay focused on the big picture, but also focused on the like little details. So what I mean by that is, where do you want to go, and keep that top of mind for you. So whether you journal it every day, but in a healthy way. Don't like leave like people with 6-pack abs in a photo in your wallet. Like, no, we're not, it's like, really think about like, maybe put a word in your wallet that says like, balanced, right? Or something like that you're trying to achieve. Like, keep that top of mind for you, and then focus on like one thing at a time. My slogan is helping you get healthy one bite at a time. And like, I really mean that. Like, focus on, maybe this week you just drink more water. Maybe this week you're focusing on setting boundaries so you can get your workout in, right? Or maybe this week you're working on adding more vegetables, or speaking up for what you want to order for dinner, because maybe you're tired of cooking all the time and you want to order in what you want to order in, not what everybody else wants to order. Like, whatever it is, pick one thing to really focus on, and then kind of build off of that.
Perfect. Toni, thank you very much. This was very informative. I know that people are on the other end of this listening and taking a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge of this. Or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you guys comment, and make sure you visit tipswithtoni.com to visit her website. Is your TED Talk, is it linked into your website?
It's on the speaking tab.
Okay, yep. So you can see it. So Toni does TED Talks. She's an absolute superstar. So if you want to find more information, once again, tipswithtoni.com. Thank you very much, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you.